Welcome to the summit about what is wholeness here and now. And I have the pleasure to introduce you to Rick Barrett. Hi.
Hi, it's a real honor to be here, Susan.
Good, thank you. And yeah, the reason why you're here is because I read your book. I've also been to an online event with you, but I read your book, Finding You in the World of It. And can you show it to me there?
Oh,
Because,
sure.
yeah.
Here's Finding You in a World of It. There we go.
Yeah, yeah, and I like your cover.
My
It's kind of
daughter, my
like
daughter drew that. So
oh, really? Wow.
yeah, it's quite lovely. You can see the the face there and all the its around, and the emerging face there in between the the authentic self that arises in that sea of objectivity.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly what your book is about too, right? And you're also a Tai Chi master, and for what 40 years, and you've been teaching that as well. And you're also a speaker, and then you're a writer. You also have another book, and yeah, so I'm excited to explore a little bit with you now for like
Wonderful,
10
wonderful.
minutes. Yeah, yeah. So in your book, what really got to me, yeah, was the it, like the world of it, and all these objects and things that we seem to get lost in and identify with. So you go into depth with that, and also what are you if you're not the world of it? What are you, or are you all of it? So yeah, maybe you can take over from here.
Sure. Uh, well, first of all, let me just give some credit to my inspiration for this. It was Martin Buber's I and Thou, which is a book published about 100 years ago. And it, for me, it's the most important book of the 20th century. And in it, Martin Buber says that in our conscious state, we have this, it's a, you're either relating to the world as an experience, that is something that you are taking in through your senses and coming up with an idea about what just happened, telling a story basically, or else you are engaging another, I to you. That is, you are meeting them with your whole being in a way that is objectless. And so the two different ways, the way I express it in my book is like two different operating systems that we use when we are engaging with awareness. And one is that it is a object-based consciousness. That is, when the conscious mind is active, you are thinking and you are creating a representation of the world. You're saying whatever is out there, I am processing it through my nervous system and coming up with an idea of this is how I'm going to explain whatever happens. We're taking the chaos of all this information that's coming in through our senses, and we're putting it into a context that is meaningful to us. And we're updating that moment by moment. There's part of the brain that's called the default mode network, which is tasked with the job of updating your narrative moment by moment. That's just a very small part of the brain, but it kind of takes over, where we're always in our story. And consequently, we are always looking at the world as full of objects. And when you do, anytime you see, and this is something Buber makes an important point about, is that anytime you see something as an object, you yourself become an object. Anytime you say that thing, anytime you express an idea, you think a thought or have a any kind of notion at all, you are creating a symbolic representation of the world, which is what makes us human. It's the most human of things that we do, is to tell a story. And that's how we share information and how we get other humans involved in the conversation. But the problem comes whenever we get confused between the story about something and the thing itself. So just like telling a story about eating pizza is not the same thing as eating pizza. You know, it's a there's a separation. The intellect creates a distance between the thing that is thought about and the object itself. And so whenever you're talking about what is, the what is that which is happening prior to the experiencing, prior to the story. Before we think about it, what do we got? So it's like if you you get you see a flash of red. I just saw a flash of red out my window, and there was a cardinal there. So before it became a cardinal on the bird feeder, it was a flash of red, and before it became a flash of red, it was just some sensations coming in, some perceptions that were coming in. And there's a process that we go through when we go from the raw now, the raw what is, to the experience, which then says, oh, I put that in context. Cardinal, that's a red bird, and oh, I saw other cardinals here, and the come every, and then the story kicks in. When we get lost in the story, we get moved farther and farther from the present moment. Yeah. And whenever we get into the present moment, we are able to then more resonate with what is happening now.
Yeah. So it's like we're more in coherence with what's actually going on. You could say, yeah.
Yes. So you go out of resonance, and when you go out of resonance, that's fine, because that's how we think of things. Anytime I'm writing, I'm not relating to the world as much as I am relating to my thoughts. And that's how we get stuff done. But we want to be able to shift between the two. We want to be able to consciously I call it toggling. That is like you're flipping a switch. You say, oh, I'm in my rational mind right now thinking about stuff, or flip the switch and say, I'm in my relating state right now, and I'm being here with what is going on. And that toggling can happen very rapidly. You can happen many, many times a second, because we have that capacity whenever we are in that expanded state to be able to shift back and forth very quickly. It's recognizing when you are doing it, when you are stuck in those thought loops. And a lot of people complain to me. I do a lot of energy healing, and people say, I can't get out of my head. My thoughts are just this constant stream, as a stream of consciousness, and I can't get out of it. The thoughts come one after the other, and they're unable to find the gap between thoughts. Mm-hmm. Because it isn't that gap between thoughts that, as Milarepa said, it was that is where the eternal wisdom shines through continuously. That is where we find that spiritual wisdom that animates our lives.
Yeah, between the thoughts. I like that, the gap.
The gap between the thoughts, yeah.
Yeah. So it's the stillness, you could say, is the no thinking, the stillness of just being.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And that's also in Tai Chi, for example, you write about how it's the stillness point and the movement, and it's like the stillness is in the movement and the movement is in the stillness, and so it sounds very wholesome, because it sounds like it's the same, right?
It's very interesting, because there's if you take an example of a pendulum swings back and forth, like say a grandfather clock, right? It swings back and forth in a very fixed path. If you look at it as an experience, if you look at it intellectually from a distance, you see a continuous motion. It's just rocking back and forth. It's continuous. But there is, as it approaches the end of its run, it slows down. The velocity slows down to zero. By the time it reaches the end of its run, the velocity is zero. At the same time, there's a turnaround where it heads back the other direction. At that 0 point, that is where the energy in the system is at its maximum. In other words, the energy that's going to take the pendulum back in the other direction is at its maximum at that still point. It's also that still point lasts 0 time.
Okay.
So when you are in that still point, there is 0 time occurring. But you can actually, with the benefit of your mind, you can enter into that still point and prolong it so that you are in that gap at that point. And that is where you are energizing the system. So just as the pendulum gets its maximum energy, and maximum energy potential is in that moment. Similarly, when we find the still points in not only our movements, but also in our thoughts, that is when we fill up with energy, we fill up with vitality. That's where we go back to the spiritual well and drink deep from the spiritual well.
Yeah, that sounds nice. And that's also, so when you are doing that, you are also thinking, but you are at the same time still, like you're not caught in the thinking. You just kind of.
When I say toggle, it means you can flip it on and off. You can think or not think in any moment. You are in control of your thinking mechanism. So a lot of people confuse themselves, their identity, their self with their thoughts. But the thinking mechanism, that it's a very small part of the brain, is actually a very, it's not you, it's something that you use. And if we can just quiet it down and find that gap between thoughts and allow the other parts of the brain to open up, and then the whole nervous system, and then the field that gets produced, there's a mind field that gets produced by all those interactions. Whenever we do that, we are able to access a lot more of our potential than if we are stuck in that identification with our thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Maybe we can stop for a second here. Just do you have something on your computer that makes noise?
It seems to be signaling me. What is it? I have to turn some alert off or something.
Yeah, because I heard it before as well, so I was just thinking.
Yeah. Let me just
edit this little part out, so it's no problem.
Let me go to my system and turn that off. Whatever sounds. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Okay, so then I'll go with another question then from here. So yeah. So you talk about the it-trance. Yeah. So there's in your book you also talk about the it-trance, like the trance, and that is that trance where you're lost in your thoughts, right? And then so you're kind of pulling yourself out of that trance,
right?
And then you are the wholeness of you, not just the thinking part of you, but as you said, it's like the whole nervous system, the whole body. You access a whole different dimension of yourself.
Yes,
I guess. Yeah. And that's also what is that other dimension of yourself that you access?
So when we're in the it trance, that is, we're unaware that these thoughts are taking us over. Basically, we're being run by our thoughts. Once we step outside of that, once we move to the gap between thoughts, not just once, but learn to do it easily and readily and volitionally, then we are then able to control that thinking apparatus so we can direct it wherever we want. We're not being overcome by old patterns, thought loops that keep running around. And more importantly, we're no longer dominated by the need to convert experience convert the now into experience, into saying, immediately trying to create a story out of something. So for example, let's say I have a sip of coffee, and rather than just being there with the coffee and tasting it and resonating with the coffee, I'm immediately saying, it's not bad, but it's not as good as a cup of coffee I had earlier today. And I wonder what happened. Wonder why that is so. And I immediately start to go into an analysis of the coffee rather than just being there with the coffee. Both are valid. Both are valid ways of being in the world. It certainly is a good idea to be able to differentiate and compare and things like that, but not if it's compulsive. If it's something that I have to do, that, that's when the it mind has taken over. It has the it-trance has taken over. So the ability to shift between that it mind, which is that object-based consciousness, that is when everything becomes an object, including me, and I'm thinking about me in this whole relationship. And whenever I move beyond that and into an IU relational mode, that's where I go into a non-objective awareness. And that is that gap between thoughts. We're in a non-object. There are no objects when I relate to you wholly with my whole being. And you initiated. You said that this is about wholeness, and that's where it really starts. We have to be able to shift into that mode. We have to be able to go into a state of wholeness, and that's a lifetime journey for a lot of people. But it doesn't have to be that. In fact, it's a starting point for the conversation. For wherever I am meeting you with my whole being, that means I have to be in a state of wholeness. I'm not thinking about me and creating Rick as an object. I'm relating to you non-objectively at that point. So in meeting, which is a term that I use for this, and it kind of comes from a Buber quote where he says that, it all begins with meeting. And that is, meeting is where you're able to do that toggling between objective thinking, which allows you to establish the context for the conversation, know what we're talking about, but also being able to shift quickly into where my entire attention is in engaging with you non-objectively. And when that happens, magic happens. And we've all had that experience where you're talking with an old friend and like, holy smokes, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. How did it get to be here? And it's the time just disappears whenever we're in that meeting state. It's not that we're drifting off into a state of transcendence where we're disconnected from the whole world. It's not a zero, it's what is. We're actually resonating with what is. And I believe, you had asked something, I think in your email, about what is it beyond the ego? And I think a real important part of this whole conversation is establishing that what the ego is. And because a lot of people see it as an enemy. There are spiritual traditions which say, we must exterminate the ego. We must get rid of, there is no self. We must get rid of that because it's a lie. It's an illusion. Yeah. But I prefer to think of ego in its original Freudian term, which is the I. He called it das Es. It was only later when it was translated into English that it became the ego. They used a Latin term for what Freud said, which was das Es, or das Es, which is das Ich. I'm sorry, das Ich, which is the I, and das Es is the it. So ego was translated from das Ich, which means the I. And learning to differentiate between the I and the it was like what he was about. And if we see the ego as a neutral term, all it really means is, what do I think I am? Who or what do I think I am? And that's an essential part of functioning as a human being. If you don't know who you are, if you have no idea who you are, you're going to have a hard time getting through your day. And even if we can get to those gaps between thoughts where we're not terribly concerned about it, we still want to be able to know that, where did I park my car, and what is my name, and
Yeah.
we want to be able to have these we want to have a story to go back to that more or less accurately describes who and what I am, and that is our ego. So even if my description of myself is, I'm a beam of light, I am pure awareness, or whatever it is, the story, I am one with the universe. Every time we say I, we're talking about ego there, and that is, and I think it needs to be considered in its neutral form as, no, this is just a marker that lets us know where I am in the game. So like, when you're playing Monopoly, and like which of the pieces you're going to choose as your marker, because that becomes you. But just to not confuse the qualities and thoughts about you with what you actually are, because what you are is beyond anything that you can put into words, anything you can think about, anything you can imagine. You are much, much more intricate, wonderful, vast, and rapturous than all that.
Yeah. Like the wholeness of us is actually much more than what we normally really experience, I guess. Like, is it something you can experience?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can experience wholeness, and in fact, it's something that something you picked up from the from reading Finding You. That if people were to, even right now, just join in with it, you just take your index finger and you point your index finger like very lightly, as if you're going to flip a light switch, and you feel into that finger. You point and feel into that finger.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath, and in that moment, you enter the gap between thoughts, because you're shifted out of the part of the brain that is thinking and into the part that is feeling. And in doing that, you create a coherence, a whole brain coherence whenever you do that, and which then brings the whole body mind into a state of coherence. And in that state, you are in a state of wholeness for the moment. And it's because you're not thinking about yourself as an object. It's just now.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. It's like you like the embodiment, right? It becomes suddenly the wholeness in the body of you. You are aware, you're fully here, or but not in a way of abstraction, but just in
Yes.
a way of being, really being present, right? Like really being available, present. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. But there's also, because I'm all into experiences. I love experiences, like all kind of, but usually with people, and go for hike in nature, or there's, yeah, but if go to festivals or whatever, I really like experiences where it feels very alive, right? And
Right.
so I'm not so much into material stuff, because it seems kind of dead to me. I like something that's more alive, like people or nature, plants, and water, or it just seems more alive than for example, a lamp, right? Or a nice stereo, or a nice car. It just doesn't seem as alive. But is there something about that people, animals, plants, nature, does it have like a different aliveness about it? And that's why
I think you're right on the money there.
yeah.
That it is that aliveness. There is a transition from that inert material, and whenever there is when something is alive. And it's like there is, one way of thinking of it is that whenever there, in an aliveness, there is a quality of coherence. That is, the different parts that assemble something cohere in a way that allow it to assume its own identity. And there's a shift there, which what we call spirit a lot of the time, just because it's that we need to differentiate between, say, a dead body and a live one. There's something that happens there, and that difference we call spirit. And whenever we are resonating with, as you say, like a tree, whenever you meet a tree with your whole being, you're not just saying, oh, I think that's a juniper, and the juniper is a species of tree, blah 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 blah, where that's it mind stuff. It's like, no, there you are, and you're resonating with it. I'm a tree hugger. I like I like to go up and I like to touch them. I remember, when I was training for martial arts tournaments, I would use trees as a way of gathering, energies that I couldn't get otherwise. I would just go up and I would just press against them and feel that the depth of their root. And that was a very important part of my training, was to feel into the root that the tree had, how deep that went, and how much of that could I absorb at a non-verbal level. And I was able to get quite a bit, from that. I was able to understand things that I could not possibly get by reading a book, say. And whatever it is, anytime we meet something with our whole being, they do not have to necessarily meet us back. That thing or person does not have to meet us back. We can meet someone or something, and just by the fact that we are doing it, we are creating a different condition by doing that. We are bringing a certain level of awareness to the event that cannot occur if you're in a purely intellectual state. If you're stuck in an it-trance, you need to be able to go out there. So when you're talking about going out in nature, there's a lot of voices out there that are talking to you at a pre-language level. You're resonating with energy and information, which is so vast that if you could tune into all of it, it would drive you insane, because you could not handle that much. So luckily we have filters that allow us to only take in as much energy and information as we can tolerate at a given time. And but the more you expose yourself to it, the broader your bandwidth becomes. You're able to tolerate more energy and information.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I can see that. The more open you are, the more somehow you resonate with the surroundings, and it works as a nice coherent vibrational energy field, or and you probably feel everything more, maybe, too.
Yeah.
I know you do energy healing, right? I mean, you're all energies, and with your Tai Chi, that's also about kind of moving around your energies, or be open to open up for everything to happen. And can you speak a little bit?
I do hands-on energy healing as well.
Yeah.
And primarily under the umbrella of polarity therapy, but it includes a lot of other things, craniosacral and things like that as well. But the idea is, again, there you're tuning in primarily in a non-verbal way, to the different energies that animate, and you can become very sensitive to qualities of energy. When I first started out, it was just less or more. There's either more energy or less energy. And those are the only two ways I could think about it. You know, where there's, oh yeah, there's more energy. Oh, there's less. But as I practiced over the decades, then I became aware of different qualities of energy. And depending on the modality that I was working with, I would be able to differentiate, let's say in the Chinese model, if you're able to differentiate between, say, wood energy, which is an expansive energy. We're in the season right now where we're springtime, and with it comes this expansiveness, and it's characterized in the Chinese calendar by the wood element. And you compare that to what we just came from, which was winter, which is water, which is a very yin or receptive, contained kind of energy. And so that one is where you're more at rest. So there's a shift from going from the very yin energy of the winter time to the expanding energy of going toward yang of springtime, which then leads into summer, which is fire energy, which is the most yang of them all, and they just kind of keep expanding outward. So learning to differentiate the different energies, not just in the Chinese model, the polarity model is a bit different. But if you do that, you then are able to ask yourself in any situation, what is the appropriate energy for this situation? And then you attune to that. And that's part of the healing process, is finding out where a person is energetically, attuning to that, and then saying, okay, what's the appropriate energy at this point to bring about the maximum healing that occurs in that time?
Yeah, to bring things into balance, maybe, or but that's kind of that's part of health, right? That's part of our health, maybe to have all these energies in balance, and but it's not really who we are, right? Because we're even beyond health. We are beyond, or we are more than that, right? We are like the eternal here now that never dies, that just is. And so it's but it's good to also have good health, and know all these energies, and or have somebody help us, or it's I mean, it's life. It's all life, and it's nice to learn about life and how we can have a good life, or a life that we flourish in. But in all that, there is that eternal awareness, loving awareness, or unconditional love, or God, or whatever we want to call it, right? Presence. It's always there, no matter what, no matter how imbalanced we are, or how balanced we are, or when we lose things in life and when we gain, and it's just always there. And that's also what you talk about between the thoughts, right? The space between the thoughts.
That is our access door. That's the doorway.
Yeah, the doorway.
That's the doorway to what that state you're talking about. And I think when we talk about what is, we're talking about something which is beyond any attempt to create a state of qualities. Anyway, a quality is something that the mind, it's the mind's way of telling a story. Let's say, if your story is God is good, then that's a fine story, and that's great, but it assigns a quality. So what's this other stuff here that is not good? And then you have to ask that, because anytime you say this, there's always a that goes with it. There's always, anytime you say that it's eternal, well, then that means that there's also got to be a finite for eternal to mean anything at all. So what I consider what is this wellspring of vitality, of life, of energy and information, whatever, is beyond our any ability to assign it a quality, and but doesn't mean that I can't have a story that helps me live my life better. I prefer to think of the universe as a benign place, a loving universe, and that serves me very well. And it beats pants off of the alternative, and but whenever I'm in that gap between thoughts, there's no good or bad. There's no right or wrong. There's no, it's just now. And in that now, the question comes up, what else is possible? And it's like you're open to the field of all possibilities at that point. And your capacity to comfortably navigate those possibilities, the potentiality of your being, which means that you're always open to the novelty of life.
Yeah.
It's like there are no formulas that say, be this way and everything will be fine. It's like, no. What else is possible? What's another way of looking at this thing? Any statement, any experience, whatever, you look at it and say, oh, that's bad. Okay, maybe not. Let's say we've just been through a rather challenging year with the pandemic, right? And that's terrible. But at the same time, my life has had many things that have come about it as a result of that I would not have experienced without that pandemic. There are ways of connecting with people that I have learned, over this time. I'm able to, I teach some Zoom classes, and we get to explore, and I get to work with people that I would not have worked with otherwise, because everybody is kind of they're being respectful of the pandemic, so they're willing to change their behavior, and that opens up new ways of exploring human interaction.
Yeah. So it's like we adapt, and in that, then things, new opportunities, and yeah. So it also, it feels like when you are established in that presence, then it spontaneously happens what happens, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
There's a lot more spontaneity in life because you have a certain confidence or faith that you're going to be able to work something out. Since you have more resources available to you, there is there's a sense that, oh yeah, we'll figure this out. Whatever this thing is, we'll figure it out. So then you go on to the next thing, and you're not filled with regret about the path not taken. You're not filled with guilt about the crimes of the past. You're looking and say, okay, what now? You're meeting the moment and saying, okay, what's the best? This is the hand I'm dealt right now. What's the best I can do with this right now?
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Rick. That I really enjoyed our conversation.
Wonderful. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and
I've got a whole bunch of videos on YouTube. You can check my YouTube channel, rickbarrett.net, and also my website is also rickbarrett.net. If you can go there, I've got hundreds of blogs I've written over time, so feel free to explore through that. And
yeah, the website is where
rickbarrett.net. Yes.
Yeah. Great. yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.